Hi there, it's Matt here, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, we're venturing beyond sleep and exploring an exciting new realm of brain science. Let's set the stage. Imagine a courtroom. The air is thick with the scent of old paper and nervous energy. On the stand sits a woman. Let's call her Sarah. She's been called to testify as a key witness in a robbery case. Her memory of the event is not just strong, it's absolute. She looks at the defense attorney and then at the defendant, a man in a rumpled suit, and says with unwavering certainty, "I remember his face. I saw him running away from the scene. It was him." She recounts the details, the cold, rainy day, the sound of the alarm, the specific way the man's hair was matted to his forehead. Her story is so vivid, so rich with sensory detail that you, as an observer, have no doubt she is telling the truth. You feel the same certainty she does. We're wired to trust this kind of narrative. We're wired to believe that our memories are a reliable chronicle of our past, a kind of personal video recorder sealed and unchangeable. But what if I told you that Sarah's certainty and your belief in it is a dangerous illusion? What if the very act of accessing a memory doesn't just retrieve it, but also opens it up to a new kind of vulnerability? What if that certainty, that bedrock of our identity, is actually just a feeling, a trick of the mind? This is the beautiful and striking landscape we are going to explore today. We're going to venture into the world of memory, not as a static library of facts, but as a living, breathing, and fundamentally malleable thing, a thing that can be deceived, manipulated, and even rewritten. And the implications of this for our justice system, for our sense of self, and for our ability to heal from trauma are profound, as you'll see. Let's begin with one of the most remarkable and foundational experiments in modern psychology, a study that started with a simple question about car crashes. In 1974, two researchers, Elizabeth Loftus and John Palmer, set out to understand the impact of language on memory. Their paper, called Reconstruction of Automobile Destruction, an example of the interaction between language and memory, became a landmark study. In their first experiment, they showed participants a short video of a car accident. They then divided the participants into 5 groups, each of which was asked a slightly different question about the same event. The critical question was about how fast were the cars going when they veered into each other. The verb was the only thing that changed across the groups. Smashed, collided, hit, simply bumped, or just the word contacted. The results were staggering. Those who were asked the smashed question gave a much higher estimate of speed, an average of 40.8 miles per hour, while the group given the word contacted gave the lowest estimate at an average of 31.8 miles per hour. A single word, a single linguistic choice had dramatically skewed their perception of the event. But Loftus and Palmer went a step further in a second, more powerful experiment. They showed a different video of a car crash and only used 2 verbs, smashed and hit. A week later, without showing the video again, they asked a crucial follow-up question. Did you see any broken glass? The fascinating part is that there was no broken glass in the original footage. Yet, a whopping 32% of the people in the smashed group falsely claimed that they had seen broken glass. In the hit group, only 14% made the same mistake. Think about that. A single word, smashed, wasn't just influencing their perception of speed. It was so powerful that it actually created a false memory of an event, broken glass, that never happened. It's like a malicious Wikipedia editor. The core page is there, but a small, seemingly insignificant edit, a single word, alters the entire narrative and leads you to believe in details that were never present in the original text. This wasn't a fluke. Loftus followed up with an even more striking study in 1995 with Jacqueline Pickrell, often called the Lost in the Mall experiment. The aim was to determine if an entirely fabricated autobiographical memory could be implanted. The researchers took a group of 24 participants and with the help of their parents or older siblings, gathered 3 real, verifiable memories from their childhoods. The researchers then created a booklet for each participant containing these 3 real stories and, critically, a 4th entirely fabricated story. One about the participant getting lost in a shopping mall as a child and being rescued by a kind older adult. Participants were asked to read the stories and then write down as many details as they could remember about each event. They were interviewed twice over the course of 4 weeks and encouraged to recall more details about all 4 events. The results were truly amazing. After the 2 interviews, 25% of the participants, a full quarter of the sample, not only believed this entirely fabricated story, but went on to add their own detailed, vivid memories to it. They remembered the specific name of the mall, the color of the adult's shirt, the feeling of fear. They weren't lying. They genuinely believed it happened. The suggestion had become a memory, a part of their own personal history. This is a profound and unsettling idea that our memories are not retrieved like a finished movie file, but rather constructed and reconstructed with each recall. It's more like a Photoshop file. Every time you open it, you can add a new layer, change a color, or even delete a piece. And after a while, you can't separate the original image from the edits. The brain doesn't have a built-in original file button. This brings us to the underlying neural architecture. For years, the question was whether these false memories were just, bad memories. But modern neuroimaging techniques are showing us something else entirely. Studies using functional magnetic resonance imaging are revealing that when a person is recalling a false memory, their brain activity looks remarkably similar to when they are recalling a true one. The neural signatures are strikingly similar, often blurring the lines of distinction, particularly in the hippocampus, the brain's primary memory hub. It's like 2 identical houses built side by side. One is a solid structure with a strong foundation. The other is a carefully constructed facade with a crumbling base. From the outside, they look the same. You only discover the difference when you try to live in them. But let's take this idea to its most extreme and profound conclusion. What if we could move beyond verbal suggestion and directly manipulate a memory at the cellular level? This isn't science fiction anymore. In the last decade, a technique called optogenetics has allowed researchers to do just that. Optogenetics is a revolutionary method that involves genetically engineering neurons to express light-sensitive proteins. When a specific wavelength of light is shone on these neurons, they fire. Now, here's the experiment that will absolutely bend your mind. In the lab of Nobel laureate Susumu Tonegawa at MIT, researchers did something incredible. They placed a mouse in a chamber, let's call it chamber A, and allowed it to explore. As it did, they used optogenetics to tag and identify the specific neurons in the hippocampus that were firing and encoding the memory of that chamber. A few days later, they put the mouse in a completely different chamber, chamber B, where it was not afraid. But while the mouse was in chamber B, the researchers used a tiny fiber optic cable to send a pulse of light, reactivating the neurons that were tagged with the memory of chamber A. At the exact same time, they administered a mild foot shock. The result? The next time the mouse was put back into chamber A, the place where it had originally been happy and safe, it froze in fear, anticipating a shock that had never happened in that location. They had successfully created a false memory, not through suggestion, not with a word, but by a direct, precise, physical manipulation of the neural circuits. They took the memory of chamber A, fused it with the fear of a shock, and restored a new, entirely fabricated association. This isn't just about the malleability of memory, it's proof that a memory is a tangible physical entity, a specific collection of firing neurons that can be surgically deconstructed and rebuilt. The neural architecture for the false memory and the true one were so similar that the mouse's brain could not tell the difference. It's like a computer engineer physically resoldering a circuit board to produce a different output. And the computer has no way of knowing its original design was tampered with. So if our memories are so fragile, so susceptible to external suggestion and even direct manipulation, what does this mean for eyewitness testimony? It means that certainty, that feeling of absolute conviction, is a terrible predictor of accuracy. A witness who is 100% sure they saw a specific person might actually be recalling a memory that was unintentionally contaminated by a police officer's question, or by a comment from another witness, or by a headline they read in the newspaper. In fact, research shows that a whopping 75% of wrongful convictions overturned by DNA evidence were initially based on flawed eyewitness testimony. This is a monumental problem, but it also opens up a door to one of the most exciting and hopeful areas of modern neuroscience: the science of memory reconsolidation. A partner and sponsor of today's podcast is Shopify. Let me share the link right away. Shopify.com/Matt Walker. As someone who spends his days researching sleep, the idea of selling merch felt, well, rather daunting. But I kept getting asked if I had t-shirts or gear. So I finally said, okay, Matt, get your act together and give it a try. And we have them coming. But the big question was, how on earth was someone like me, a scientist, going to get these items into your hands? Everyone said the same thing: use Shopify. It turns out, even me, an analog man in a digital world, was able to do it without any learning curve. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, you can build a really impressive online store that matches your brand style. Oh, and if you need artificial intelligence-powered help writing product descriptions or touching up images, Shopify's got that too. All of which is to say that if you're ready to sell, just try Shopify. So if you are interested, turn your business idea into reality with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/Matt Walker. Once more, that's shopify.com/Matt Walker. Let's switch gears completely and go from the courtroom to a lab. Back in the year 2000, a groundbreaking paper by Karim Nader, Glenn Schaaf, and Joseph Ledoux, titled "Fear Memories Require Protein Synthesis in the Amygdala for Reconsolidation After Retrieval," completely upended the scientific consensus. For decades, the belief was that once a memory was formed and stored, a process called consolidation, it was permanent. It was locked away like a book on a shelf. But Nader's work proved this wrong. Here's what they did. Using a classical conditioning model, they taught rats to associate a specific auditory tone with a mild foot shock. The rats quickly learned to freeze in place when they heard the tone, anticipating the shock. This created a powerful fear-based memory. A day later, Nader brought the rats back. He played the tone again, which, of course, triggered the fear memory and caused the rats to freeze. But this time, immediately after playing the tone, he injected a protein synthesis inhibitor called anisomycin directly into the amygdala, the brain's emotional processing center. Anisomycin literally prevents the brain from creating the new proteins it needs to restore the memory. The result was stunning. When Nader tested the rats a day later, they showed no fear response to the tone. The fear memory was gone, not just suppressed, but gone. He discovered that when a memory is retrieved, it becomes temporarily labile, or opens it back up to modification for a brief window of time, about 6 hours. During this labile window, or opportunity for modification, change, or updating, The memory needs to be reconsolidated or restored. And if you disrupt that reconsolidation, you can fundamentally alter the memory. Think of it like this. A memory isn't a book on a shelf. It's a Word document that every time you open it to read it, you must also save it again. And for that brief moment, it's open. You have the opportunity to make an edit. You can't edit a closed document, but you can edit an open one. And that simple revolutionary discovery that memories are not static, but are vulnerable to change every time we recall them is the open door to new therapeutic protocols. Now let's bring this back to humans. Imagine a person suffering from severe post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Their traumatic memory isn't just a recollection, it's a living, breathing nightmare. It's like a faulty fire alarm that goes off not just when there's a fire, but also when a car backfires, or they hear a specific tone of voice, or they see a certain object. Their body is constantly in a state of fight or flight, trapped in a physiological feedback loop of fear. This is where the science of reconsolidation becomes a genuine tool for healing. One of the most effective evidence-based tools for nightmares, for example, is a cognitive behavioral technique called image rehearsal therapy, IRT. It's incredibly simple, yet remarkably powerful. The therapist and the patient work together to turn the patient into a kind of director of their own nightmares. The patient recalls a recurring nightmare, identifies the most frightening moments, and then works with the therapist to create a new, less frightening narrative. They might change the ending, give themselves a superpower to defeat the threat, or just turn the monster into a silly puppet. Then, every day, the patient mentally rehearses this new positive version of the dream. This is hypothesized to work because the act of recalling the dream makes the traumatic memory temporarily labile. By consciously rescripting and rehearsing a new narrative, you are actively introducing a new, less threatening ending into that memory file. You're effectively resaving a different version of the story. And the results are stunning. In numerous studies, between 70% to 80% of participants who complete IRT see a significant reduction in the frequency and intensity of their nightmares. This principle extends to other therapeutic contexts as well, leveraging both cognitive tools and, in some cases, pharmacology. A team of researchers led by Alain Brunet developed a protocol using a beta blocker called propranolol. Propranolol is a common drug that blocks the effects of adrenaline. The protocol is simple and, like the Nader study, centers on that vulnerable window. A patient with PTSD goes to the clinic, is given a dose of propranolol, and then for a few minutes, they recall their traumatic memory in as much detail as possible, often by reading a written script of the event. The retrieval of the memory opens it back up to modification, and the propranolol, by blocking the adrenaline receptors in the brain's amygdala, prevents the fear and physiological panic from being restored along with the memory. It's like our Word document analogy again, but this time you open it, and when you go to hit save, a firewall intercepts the file and scrubs it of all the damaging fear-based code. The factual memory remains. What happened still happened, but the debilitating emotional response is profoundly weakened. In a study on victims of the 2015 Paris terror attacks, Brunet's team found that this protocol, administered over several weekly sessions, led to a 50% to 70% reduction in PTSD symptoms for many of the participants, with long-term follow-ups showing the effects were sustained even years later. It's not a magic bullet, and it requires careful clinical supervision, but it's a profound step forward. This brings us to a final, more philosophical point. It's a paradox that has troubled thinkers for centuries, famously known as the ship of Theseus. The story goes that the ship of Theseus, on display in a harbor, was so old that over time, every single one of its original wooden planks was replaced with a new one. The question is it still the same ship? This same question, it turns out, applies to you. The very physical components of your brain, the synapses, the proteins, the lipids that make up the neural architecture where a memory is encoded, are not static. They are constantly turning over, being broken down and rebuilt. The half-life of many synaptic proteins is measured in weeks or months. So if you have a memory from 20 years ago, perhaps from your first day of school, the physical molecules and proteins that held that memory, trace at its inception, are now entirely gone, replaced many times over. The question then becomes, is it still the same memory? Are you in fact the same person who had it? The fact that a single memory can persist for decades despite its physical substrate being completely renewed is arguably one of the greatest mysteries of neuroscience, and it pushes us to reevaluate the very nature of identity. So, we have learned in this podcast that our past is not a finished book, but a dynamic library constantly being reorganized by a creative sculptor, and that this very malleability, a source of error that can lead to false memories, powerful enough to undermine our justice system, is also its greatest strength, offering a biological tool that, with the right protocols and interventions, can be leveraged to weaken the grip of traumatic memories and free us from their emotional burden. As a brain scientist, having done work in this area myself, there are three thoughts, three philosophical consequences of this science that fundamentally changed how I think about the brain and how I view the world and other people when I interact with them. First, the idea that your identity is a fiction. We believe our sense of self is a continuous, solid, and reliable narrative, the story of who we are. But the science shows us that our memories are a malleable collection of edited and re-edited stories. The you from a decade ago is not just a person with different opinions, but a person with a different and perhaps entirely distinct set of recalled events, many of which you have unconsciously edited. Your identity is not a fact. It is a creative and ongoing work of fiction that you are constantly and often unknowingly writing. It is the story you tell yourself and that you are editing with every waking moment. Second, the notion of truth is not what we think it is. We often think of truth as an objective, external reality, but if every individual's memory of an event is a malleable and fallible reconstruction, then shared truth is often a collective fiction, a consensus of mutually influenced and edited memories. This has profound implications for history, for politics, for journalism. The objective truth might exist somewhere, but our human experience of it, the stories we tell, the historical narratives we accept, is an intricate tapestry woven from billions of imperfect threads. Understanding this isn't about being cynical. It's about recognizing the human element at the heart of every story ever told. Third, the radical idea that forgiveness is a neurobiological act. For centuries, forgiveness has been framed as a purely emotional or moral struggle, an abstract, almost spiritual process of letting go of anger and resentment. But the science of memory reconsolidation offers us a different view. It suggests that letting go might be a literal physical process of weakening the neural circuitry that links a traumatic memory to its associated pain. Forgiving an act might not just be a choice you make, but a tangible biological protocol you can follow. It reframes one of humanity's oldest and most difficult challenges, not as a mystical journey of the soul, but as a solvable engineering problem of the brain. The possibility of healing in this light is not just a hope, but a genuine tool. And with that, I'll simply say thanks for listening. I'm so enjoying doing these general brain science lectures. Please let me know on social media if you are, because if you're enjoying them half as much as I am, then technically I'm enjoying them twice as much as you are. Take care, sleep well, and bye for now.